You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Day and night must scramble for
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Torah. I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson with NRM Streamcast, and we'll spend our time talking Torah, learning stuff, and having fun while we learn. You can always send your questions and comments to our mailbag at letstalktorah@gmail.com. That's letstalktorah@gmail.com. And, of course, I will answer as many as I can. Or, if you'd like, you could go to our webpage at letstalktorah.net. That's letstalktorah.net. Archives, old shows, new shows, leave comments, leave questions, and the all-important donate button where you can help the show continue to grow. We have different levels. If you want a shout-out, we give out shout-outs. If you like to be anonymous, we can be anonymous. Whatever makes you happy makes us happy, and we do, again, appreciate all those people that donate to our show. And, of course, I don't have the latest update because they haven't updated for a week, but on the top 10 in FeedSpot's 10 Best Jewish Book Podcasts, we are at number 4 today, and that makes me happy. Nothing like being in a top 10 of anything, I guess. So I was at a funeral earlier today. Really a friend. I mean, older than me, but a friend. His name was Seymour. And Seymour he was a real tzaddik, I gotta tell you. He was just a great person. He was our architect. Twice he didn't build it, but he was the architect for our boys' wing. He was one of the architects for the high school wing and some other plannings, and he was great. He was that architect that he fought for you. I know there's some architectural firms, they do all the drawings, and then they hand it to you and say, give it to your builder, give it to your foreman, and don't bother us. When Seymour was your architect, he was the foreman. He made sure everybody did what they were supposed to, and he fought with people when we had to deal with different organizations, and they said, you can't do it that cheaply, and he said, yes, I can, and I'm going to make sure it's done for that price, and it's going to be perfect, and it's going to be great. Seymour was really, really great. I one time went to his studio because I guess an architect's always doing drawings, so he was also a painter. And I remember this because this is part of Seymour. Like if you knew Seymour, probably this resonates. So he has a picture, it looks like an ocean and people, and I said, Seymour, what's this picture? He says, that is a picture of the Jews going through the Red Sea, the splitting of the Red Sea. I said, wow. Now I don't know a lot about painting, but I understand when people put something in a painting, there's usually some type of purpose. So Seymour, in the waves over here, there's like dots. What are those? He said, those are the Jews that got lost. I said, Seymour, I said, the Jews didn't get lost in the Red Sea. They all went in, they all went out. No one got lost. And he said, Rabbi, that's your version. This is my version. I think I'll tell the story over to the family. I would like to go after the show. I'm going to drive out. It's a long drive. But I would like to drive out to give my condolences to the family, and maybe I can share that story with them. He even made, when we had honored one of our big donors, so he had made a painting using the donor's initials and the wife initials and some other stuff about the building. He made a whole design, a whole painting. And I said, Seymour, I love this. He says, you do? I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to make one for you. And he did. He used my initial and my wife's initial and our last name initial, and then there's some Jewish things like a menorah in there, and I don't remember what else is in there. It's hanging. It's big. It's like, I don't know, 3x5. It's really 5x3. And then he made me like a smaller one, like I don't know what you even call it. Just that's not the painting. That's like the picture, the diagram. So it's in my office. It's beautiful, and I appreciate it. And I do feel I miss Seymour. And I went to the funeral today, and my principal called me because he was also there, and he said, no hearse? I said, no, probably they don't want a procession, so, there's no hearse there because people get nervous nowadays. Sometimes the procession, there's car accidents. He said, you sure? So I went to one of the funeral directors, and I said, no hearse? And he said, I can't even say the words. He said, no, they cremated him, or they're gonna cremate him. The coffin was in the room for the funeral services, but then they're gonna cremate him later. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, it's not like I can walk up to the family during the services. It's not gonna happen. But I did, in my own way, say, Seymour, you don't deserve this. And I'm saying it again. Seymour was a good guy. He deserved a full-fledged Jewish burial. He did not deserve to be cremated. And on that note, let's talk this week's Torah portion. So we gotta sort of back up. We gotta back up into last week's Torah portion so we understand what's going on over here. So, at the end of last week's Torah portion, Moses and the Jewish people destroy, I was going to say defeat, but they really destroy two large armies. One was Og the giant, and one was actually Og's brother, Sichon. And both of those giants and their armies had been hired by the land of Canaan to protect them. When the Jewish people come, don't let them in. And of course, Moses sends letters to both of them, or messengers. And he says, we got nothing to do with you. We don't want you guys. We don't need you guys. We are on our way to Israel. Do you mind if we pass through? And each one came out and said, what do you out of your mind? We're hired to make sure you don't get in. We can't let you in. Fine, you're not going to let us in. You're going to come fight. We'll have to fight. So Moses leads the battle. Interesting, not like by Amalek, where Joshua leads the battle. And not like in a couple weeks from now. We're going to have the war with Midian, and there Pinchas really leads the battle. But here Moses leads the battle, and both giants are defeated. And the Jewish people now are in control of a huge area of land. Huge. It's going to actually be split by 2.5 tribes, Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh. So this land, which they weren't supposed to get, which is called the other side of the Jordan, is now in their control. But not only that, Sichon had conquered earlier the land of Moab. Now, it happens to be that the Jewish people do not officially fight with Ammon and Moab. Why? That those are Lot's descendants, the descendants of Lot, remember, Abraham's nephew. And God said you can't go to war with them. And one of the reasons, but it would seem the main reason, is that they were going to have famous descendants, and they had to live. One is going to be King David's grandmother, her great-grandmother, Ruth. And the other actually is King Solomon's wife, Naamah. Naamah's from Ammon, and Ruth is from Moab. So we're not really allowed to fight with them. It would seem that the Moabi people didn't know this. So the Moabi people, they had to get a king, because till then they were under the control of Sichon. So they get themselves a leader. His name is Balak, which is interesting. That's the name of this week's Torah portion. Torah portion is called Balak. Really, this whole Torah portion has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's God protecting the Jewish people from the curse of Bilam. But really, almost the entire Torah portion doesn't talk about the Jews at all. It's a story, it's an outside story where we don't play a part at all. The only part we play is they wanted to curse us, and God didn't let. It's almost its own separate piece. But it's part of the Torah, and it's interesting. The name of the Torah portion is named after this non-Jewish king who failed. Okay, he failed at trying to conquer us. It will be this Balak's, I think, great-granddaughter, who's, I don't remember how many generations, who is Ruth. But we don't have to worry about that. In any case, so first of all, the reason this Torah portion is here is that we need to know, as the Jewish people, that God is always taking care of us. We don't always see it, we don't always feel it, we don't always know it, but the fact is, anytime in our history, sometimes we do know those are the bad times, but many are the time that we don't even know that people are starting up with the Jewish people. Only they know. And still, we're still standing because God doesn't let. So this Torah portion lets us know that God protects us even though he doesn't tell us. It's like God has to tell us how he protected us from the curse of Bilam so that we would know to appreciate. Otherwise, we have no idea. I saw an interesting parable. There was a king, and he owned vast lands, hunting lands, and he loved to show off, and visiting dignitaries would come and they'd go on the hunt, but there was a problem. This king was a lousy hunter. You leave him on his own, he won't catch anything. Nothing. No deer, no elk, no bear, no wild animals, nothing. This king couldn't do a thing. So what did the advisors do? The advisors had their greatest hunters go ahead, catch different kinds of animals, and prepare the animals in strategic areas so the king would just come, shoot the animal, and wow, we caught a whatever. And of course, after the king caught the animal that had been pre-prepared, everybody applauded the great success of the king. But at the end of the day, the king did zero. That's the point. At the end of the day, the king did absolutely nothing. And that's what happens with us. Right? Hashem makes it, God makes it to look like we accomplished, look like we have skills, look like we have amazing capabilities. But at the end of the day, God is pulling all the strings. Right? So, the war with Sichon, the war with Og, you think it's the Jewish people? Like Balak is watching, whoa, Moses and the Jewish people conquered these great nations. We couldn't fight to save our lives, which is probably what we were trying to do. Like God did the whole thing. So Balak is impressed when really there's nothing to be impressed. The problem is, since Balak thought we did the whole thing, so he thought that he could hire Bilam. Balak thought he could hire Bilam to take care of us. But the whole thing was a mistake. God did the whole thing. So you think God's going to let Bilam curse us? Like, what are you thinking? But clearly he was not. So what happens? Let's get a little bit into the story of Balak hiring Bilam, just to start giving us a flavor of what's going on over here. So the Torah portion starts out that Balak is now the king of Moab, and he sees the Jewish people have conquered Sichon and Og, and he sends off messengers. He says, it's not normal. No one's supposed to be able to defeat Sichon and Og. These are two mighty nations. Something strange. So he sent off his spies or advisors, And he said, find out who this Moses is. Who is this leader, this Moses? So they come back and they say, oh, he's from Midian, and his power is not, he's not a mighty warrior. His power is his mouth, his prayer, his talking to God. You need a person who fights with his mouth, not a person who fights with weapons. So he says, oh, let's go hire Bilam. Bilam is very famous. Bilam is this famous person who has the ability to curse. Now, when they talk to Bilam, they make it sound like Bilam has the power to bless and the power to curse. In truth, Bilam really has neither. It's debatable exactly what he does, but the Talmud says that one thing Bilam knew. Bilam knew the exact millisecond that God gets angry. God gets angry, it says, for a millisecond every day. And Bilam knew when that millisecond was, and either he could start his prayer at that time or start his curse at that time, or just like say one word in that millisecond and point out, and the curse came true. So according to that, people would pay Bilam a lot of money to curse somebody. Blessing? We never find that he blessed anybody, but I guess they just assumed that if you can curse, you can bless. But in truth, he really couldn't do either, but at least he had this knowledge. Or, keep in mind, Bilam, God talks to Bilam. Bilam is a prophet for the world. So he is a prophet. He talks to God. He's a rotten person. But God talked to him. A different explanation I've seen is that Bilam understood the future. He knew what God was going to do. So if you came to him, or he would go to you and say, hey, this country over here, I could curse them and you'll beat them in battle. Because Bilam knew the future, that your country was going to defeat your enemy in the next battle. So he pretended. Now, if you came to him and asked him, okay, curse this guy, he could say, I'm not cursing him for you. I don't want to do it. You can't, I'm not interested. Because he knew it wasn't going to work, right? He knew you were going to lose. He'd go to the other country and say, hey, they want to hire me to curse you. You give me more money, and I'll curse them for you, right? So he played the game. He was like quite brilliant in that way, to play the game and make a lot of money. So what happens is that Balak sends dignitaries to Bilam to hire Bilam to curse the Jewish people. So they come, and Bilam says, okay, before I do anything, I guess this much Bilam knew, I gotta talk to God. But God only talks to me at night, like in a dream. So here's some rooms, make yourself comfortable, and I'll tell you tomorrow morning if I can go. And God says you can't go. He gets up and he says to the guy, sorry. The language is just interesting. But Bilam says, God says I can't go with you. In other words, he added a word, right? God says don't go. Bilam says I can't go with you, right? You hear the difference? Right? In other words, you're the problem, not me. I can do whatever I want. You're the problem. So there's an interesting story. The Tsar was having meetings about closing down the yeshivas. They didn't want the schools to only teach Torah, as happening today. It happened 100 years ago, right? The Tsar was having meetings that the Jewish institutions should not be allowed to only teach Torah. They have to teach other subjects as well, because they really also understood that if we get our foot in the door and we start forcing them to teach other subjects, we'll wipe out their schools. So there was a non-religious Jew who was actually on the side of the Tsar, and he was trying to get the religious Jews to stop only teaching Torah, put in other subjects into the school. So this non-Jewish officer says to the rabbis, he says, we could close you down. We could shut you down. Beis Halevi, a great rabbi, says, you can't do anything. Right? Now let me explain what you can't means. There's two types of can't. If I told you to smack the czar across the face, could you do it? Of course not. Now, and I go through this conversation in class all the time. You can't? I mean, you could, right? But you won't because you're not a fool, right? He'll kill you. Or perhaps you respect him so greatly, right? Telling your child, go slap your parent. If the child, not a little child, let's say an adult child, you tell an adult child, go slap your father. They're not doing it. You can't do it. You can't. You don't want to. And I'm very proud of you for that, by the way. Right? But you can't tell me you can't. You could, but you don't want to. However, the Beis Halevi continued to this officer. He said, if I tell you, pick up this mountain and carry it across the street, you can't. It is just physically impossible. Right? Bilam felt he was on the first side of the equation. He says, I can't go against what God told me to do. I mean, I could. I just don't want to. Because of my tremendous respect for God, which is really not true, right? Because Bilam thinks that he could, but he can't. Like, you can't slap the czar. You can't hit your parent, right? But that's like a chutzpah. That's pretending as if Bilam has some power on his own. Well, in truth, the ability for Bilam to go ahead and curse the Jewish people is like you trying to pick up that mountain and carrying it across the street. Okay, we just have to have a feeling of who Bilam is, what Bilam is trying to accomplish, and he does not have that ability. Okay, so now. So God tells Bilam, you can't go. And so the officers go back, the dignitaries go back to Balak, and they say, Bilam said, we're not important enough officers that he should listen to us. So Balak says, no problem. Let's get the next level officers up here. Let's get high-ranking officials. So now they come a second time. So now Bilam knows this is not going to work out too well, but I'll do what I could do. So Bilam says, okay, let me ask God again. So he goes to sleep, and God again says, you could go. Okay, I don't want to take away your livelihood. They want to hire you. You could go. It was understood. It's a bad idea. You shouldn't go. But you could. But by the way, don't forget, you can't say anything without my permission. As the only words that you're going to be allowed to say is what I put into your mouth, which in the end of the story, that's exactly what happened. 3 times Bilam tries to curse the Jewish people. 3 times God talks to Bilam. 3 times Bilam comes back to Balak, and the prophecy that he gives over is a total blessing, which makes Balak quite angry. In any case, so they start to travel. So Bilam saddles up his donkey, which is quite unusual because it's not really normal that you should be saddling up your donkey because most people ride horses. But Bilam rode his donkey. Hashem didn't like that. I told you you could go, but the attitude was you shouldn't want to go. And Bilam is, okay, let's do this. Maybe God will let me curse them. So 3 times an angel gets in the way of the donkey. And Bilam doesn't see the angel. The donkey does. He walks off into the field. Bilam hits him. He crushes his leg against some bricks. Bilam hits him. He crashes to the floor on top, and he rolls. I guess he rolls over on Bilam. Bilam hits him again. And then the donkey talks. So this is very famous. The donkey talks to Bilam. What are these amazing words? Why'd you hit me 3 times? And Bilam answers, "Wait a minute, what? I hit you because you're not going the direction I told you to go. Now you're having an argument with a donkey. What are you, out of your mind? A donkey's talking to you. Donkeys don't talk. Why are you arguing with a donkey?" And then the donkey says, "Have I ever led you astray? Have I ever, been a rotten donkey to you? You think I'm not doing this for your benefit?" And then God lets Bilam see the angel. And now the angel will talk to Bilam, but in the end the donkey will die now, because it's embarrassing that you were bested by a donkey. The fact that the donkey had the power to talk is actually from the beginning of the creation of the world. But so God gave a donkey the ability to talk, and this is what the donkey says. Like, that's it? No great philosophical, some message from God? But maybe there was a message from God. Right? The message is, you think you can't see the angel, right? You automatically assume that everybody must do what you want. But God, at the end of the day, is in control. And even the donkey can see that God is in control. You, Bilam, have the problem, and we sometimes have the problem that we don't see that God's in control. Well, the music is playing, so of course we have to end, and as always, we keep it short and sweet. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful sponsor listeners. I can't do it without you. Thank you on the production team. We have Ellen in the back today. I hope I've left you with some food for thought. Until next time, I am Rabbi Tzvi Jacobson. You've been listening to Let's Talk Torah on NRM Streamcast. Until next time, don't forget to think about it.
There's a house we can build. Every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I compile, each one there